Having said that, my topic for concern has been climate change. We have been working since Vivekanand sir has put the seed. The seed has blossomed and flowered, and we have had bearing fruits with CMFRI leading at least climate change work initiatives across the country and many parts across the globe. We find that climate change has been not only an issue for the fishermen, but also for the researchers also, in terms of huge funds coming and the kind of impact which we did in the studies. Basically, in CMFRI's work, I am a part of the CMFRI's work for the last 10 years. We have started the work with Vivekanand sir. He guided me through many years, and then we did some independent research, and now even he also impact our research in terms of suggestions and probably inviting me to such kind of many meetings nationally and internationally. So some of the major impacts of climate change in marine fisheries have been the sea level rise, extreme events, habitat, catch revenue, fisher livelihood, and it becomes very difficult for management options because it is complex, difficult, time frame, felt needs, multidimensional. Many times it becomes difficult because of the resistance of people to move from the present location to different areas actually. Now, I'll not go the details into it, but in general, if people talk about climate change as a myth, no, it's not a myth. The projected changes have been, we are having a projected warming of 2 to 4.7. Probably this is 3.3 as per the 2100 A1B scenario. And the global sea level rise is also increasing. And approximately 20% of India's population live in coastal areas. That's where the hue and cry, when you have a policy change, what will be having the impact on the fisher sector as such. So taking a cue from Vivekanand sir's study in 2009, we'll tell that we have approximately 450 people per square kilometer, which is at least 1.5 times more than what other states. And 25% of the population in the coastal districts live within 50 kilometers from the coastline. So that indicates that. So if we put across all these effects, the ecological, direct, socioeconomic impact of climate change on fisheries, as per the FAO plot, it shows something like a very complex relationship. There are ecological impacts, there are socioeconomic impacts, there could be direct impacts. But when we started looking for the Indian context, we understood the marine ecosystem and its components could impact climate change in the environment, the resources, and the resource users, and which we'll be covering up in the coming slides. When it comes to marine climate change in the environment, we understand there is sea level rise, there is sea surface temperature, there is a hydrological changes affecting the physical and chemical properties of water, the increase in the climatic events like El Nino and Enso, and also erratic monsoon and extreme events. Now, when we're talking to the fishermen community, they were not knowing much about climate change. They were finding that climate change is basically erratic monsoon extreme events. That means if they are unable to go for fishing on a particular day, they consider that as climate change. That is the kind of climate change awareness which fishermen had prior to CMFRI and many other international or national research organizations venturing towards climate change research. So it shows a very dismal picture for countries like India. The danger from rising sea levels, you could find that after China, India is going to have a huge thing with temperature changes from 4 degrees to 2 degrees Celsius. This is something which is related to sea surface temperature up to 2015, based on which you could find that the sea surface temperatures are quite high, the anomalies are quite high, leading to much difficulties. Now, CMFR has been focusing mostly with the mandate, we have been focusing on climate change and its impact on resources, which was led by Vivekanand sir et al. And the different people, Zakaria and others who have been working on this. I need to thank them for, because most of the things I learned from them, and some of the slides which have been used from their purpose also. But we have been focusing most on climate change on the resource users. But when I come to climate change on the resources, we find that climate change has increased the species composition of phytoplanktons, and some are found in deeper waters and Indian mackerel. Now, Indian mackerel was used to be caught in the tradition at a certain point of time. But consequent to climate change, we found that it is even being caught in the bottom trawlers. Now, when it's being caught in the bottom trawlers, they've got a significance in the traditional community, because the traditional community who found their fish basket, which is usually sardines, mackerel, center, they were not getting it. Now, when it came to sardine, the sardine started moving. And as a joke, I'll tell that sardine has gone for modeling in Bombay, and sardine has went to eat Dokla in Gujarat. And now they joined with Mamata Banerjee in Calcutta, and they started seeing Vijay movies in Tamil Nadu. That's what we tell. So the sardine sort of started moving. So again, when sardine moves, it is good that sardine is available in plenty across other places. But we are concerned because when sardine is put to landings in Gujarat, it goes for the northern part of India where it is being consumed. When it goes to West Bengal and the north and the northeast part of India, probably it is being used to fish meal, and probably when it goes to Tamil Nadu and other places, sometimes it might come back to Kerala, leading to higher price rises. So sardine, which was considered to be a low value fish at certain point of time, has now become costly to the range of 200 plus. Again, we find vulnerability of corals. There was threat. Now the corals are bleaching. There has been migration of fish in tuna. There have been phenological changes, threat fin breams, which started breeding in the cooler months. And also we started finding that because of trophic level changes, because of target exploitation of CF fish and pomfrets, the puffer fish came in, catch reduction, and also the species availability also changed. So again, in addition, we find that some of the species started maturing at smaller stages, and the fecundity reduced, the trophic interaction of species also changed, and also we found the loss of spawning synchronicity with season, so less recruitment of fishery was also found. So this is related to some of the phenological changes which we found in Bombay duck, which used to be maturing at smaller stage at 232, but now it has changed to 190. So the fishes started maturing at smaller sizes. The pomfrets, which used to be maturing at 400 grams per size, now started maturing at 280. This was again found in the coastal prawns as well as mackerels. And when fishes started maturing at smaller size, it means that there is less productive output or lesser number of eggs. Again, we found in shrimps also in the Mangalore, the Dobsoni and the Monocirrus, which used to be maturing at 80 millimeter, now has decreased to 71. And the Monocirrus, which was 135 mm, now started decreasing to 116 mm, all leading to lesser number of eggs. So the fecundity loss, if you estimate per individual size during the last 30 years, there is a percentage loss per individual ranging from 6 to 28% across Dobsoni, Monocirrus, and Stylifera. So these are threats from coral climate change to corals. We have a healthy coral which becomes stressed and which later lead to bleaching and other things. So the temperature was also found to be impacting as per CMFRI studies. So the metabolic activities of fish are to be increased. So we understand that for every 1% increase in the temperature, the metabolic activity increased by 10%, which means that 10% more oxygen is required for every 1 degree rise in temperature. So this has been the work, a seminal work which is done by CMFRI regarding oil sardine. Oil sardine distribution is mostly in the Malabar upwelling zone, which is between 8 degree north and 14 degree longitude and 75 and 77 longitude. So until 1985, if you see, the entire catch came from the Malabar upwelling zone, but during the last 2 decades, we found that there has been distribution shift. There is a range shift from 14 degree north to 20 degree north. So this is how we find that it has been found. So all these has got an economic impact, as I told you. When sardine is not being put to non-food uses, probably it is being used as a bait. It could be used as a live bait. It could be used as a fish meal. It could be sent to other countries, all making sardine more and more dearer to consumers across Kerala and other consuming parts of the country. So this is the distributional shift. We find that the threat fin breams you normally used to be they changed from the warmer months to the cooler months, from April, September to October, March, now it's changed. This has indicated the mackerel catch, which is around 7.5% in the northwest, now it has increased to around 18% during 1997, 2006. And the latest data indicates it's around 28% during 2007 to 2019. So again, we started seeing the climate change on some of the species which CMFR has been working under the mariculture. The pompano, we have seen the growth during 30 degrees Celsius above and 30 degrees Celsius below. We find that there has been stark difference between the species in terms of the size and the growth and its maturity. So, but as an economist, we have been always trying to work on the climate change on the resource users actually. So the effect of climate change in resource users could be, it could lead to migration because people never find jobs. So they start migrating different jobs. Sometimes they might migrate to fisheries intensive states, or they might leave fisheries due to attrition and other things. The income is affected, the industry is affected. There could be unemployment, health issues, poverty, and loss of property and livelihood. So what we've been trying to do for the last 10 years had been, we were trying to quantify the climate change impact on the resource users actually. So we have got 2 major projects. One was under NICRA and the other one was a GULLS project, in which we started trying to assess the vulnerability. We started dealing with the different components. We started engaging the fishers. Then we developed linkages and finally come up with some some bottom-up approach where the people have been involved. So when you talk about a policy for improving the climate change adaptation mitigation, we come up with what is known as not as a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach. We consider what is known as a balancing of result approach. So balancing of result approach takes into account the top-down as well as the bottom-up. Top-down indicates that the government is going to provide directives in the formation of ministries, in the formation of development plans which have been implemented with funding from the exchequer. And the bottom-up planning involves the stakeholders, the primary stakeholders will be involved, and they'll be telling what are the different options, what are the different options required, who could be the climate change agent. So our effort has been basically to bridge between the government, the stakeholders, the local self-governments, and also the researchers on one side, and the different fishers, the community, the leaders, the women, the children, and the youth from the other side. So we were able to provide a table where we could discuss and develop different plans for adaptation and mitigation. So this is the initial studies which we did during 2011-15, wherein we understood that what are the different coastal districts which are vulnerable, and based on the parameters of demography, infrastructure, occupation, and others, we could develop different vulnerability assessment for different districts. We identify the different districts, and we use this particular methodology, which is known as a past methodology framework, which is the methodology used by CMFRI and many other institutes for the time being in assessing how much it could impact. We have taken 5 different parameters, namely environment, fishery, social, economic, and development drivers. Each has got its own attributes, and each will be having resilient indicators and score based on which we develop. And as per our studies during 2015 until 2015, we understood that climate change has impacted mostly the fishery in terms of the phenology, in terms of species, catch, loss in fisheries and aquaculture. So this particular methodology gives an idea that if you want to improve adaptation mitigation option, what is that particular parameter which needs to be improved? Now, in this particular case, for Kerala fishery, we understood that the major factor which is impacted in the fishery is the catch as well as the phenology distribution. These are areas of concerns where we need to work. Now, in 2015, we got an international project based upon the work which we did under the climate change project and some of our senior works. So we could get this project wherein we developed a new concept which is known as the climate change hotspots. So what is climate change hotspot? Like the biodiversity hotspot, we speak of a climate change hotspot, which indicates that these are places where the manifestations of climate change are visible much earlier to other places. We have Upwell, Malabar, Upwell, and we understood that manifestations. We came across 5 different hotspot areas across the different continents. It was in Southern Africa, Australia, Western Australia, Mozambique Channel, Southern India, and Brazil, where we had around 15 institutes and 40 scientists working. And this is the different sites which I talked. The coastal districts of Kerala with fisheries abundance and distribution shift. We had one in Southeast India, which is the Ramanathapuram and Thoothukudi districts also. So 2 regions were selected. The basic IPCC model, vulnerability model, wherein we took exposure plus sensitivity minus adaptive capacity is the vulnerability. But now people don't talk as vulnerability. Now we talk about resilience, where the adaptive capacity is adds on and improving the sensitivity and reducing exposure, found the means and measures to improve resilience across different regions. So these are the different components of integrated framework. For under each category, we have identified a total of around 195 parameters, 198 parameters with exposure 36, sensitivity 37 parameters, and adaptive capacity 126 parameters were identified. We did a survey across 1,000 households, 819 households to be specific. We went and surveyed each household. We understood what is the exposure across the different parameters, sensitivity across, and the overall vulnerability of the different places. In fact, for Kerala, we did this study in Ernakulam as well as in Trivandrum. In Ernakulam, we took Elangunapuzha and in Trivandrum, we took Pundra and Bhimapalli village. You could see the different color ranges, which indicates what is the level of vulnerability across. And get this superimposed by using the exposure to indicate if you want to improve on the adaptive capacity, we can go to a particular household which is in the grid, and that particular household will have the scores, and you could see that how best that particular household could be improved to ensure that they are more resilient towards climate change. So this also indicates sensitivity and exposure also. Now, if I find sensitivity are found to be in dark, which indicates that that particular household are more, and basically this indicates the total vulnerability. So taking a cue from this, we understood that these are the major parameters which are going to get affected. So it was important that to the fishermen to be involved, we identified what could be the different alternative livelihood options which could be available with them. So we did this study during May, July 2017, and we came up with these are the different options available. You could see that since the fishermen lacks a lot of knowledge, they have huge experience, skill, and their attitude and all, based on which we understood that these could be the major alternate livelihood options available. But you can see that we also find some of the things related activities like cage culture, which could also the government, the local self-government. There are people who have got no livelihood options. So which we did want to do was, and a macroeconomic picture, we wanted to see how the carbon emissions are going. Now, in the climate change regime, it is going to be important. Green fishing, blue economy is going to hold a good way. So we started understanding that what is the carbon emission across the different fishing sectors. We came up with releases around 11 kilogram of carbon for every 1 ton. Whereas mayonnaise and motor sector, we understand that our fish which is being caught is going to create an incentive for the future in the context of certified CR as well as the Kyoto protocols. So in general, these are the climate change impacts and resilience measures. We understand that there is low livelihood options due to reduced catches. We have got the different strategies and the stakeholders involved, the different funding agencies, the village vulnerability, and climate change losses, reduced income. For these kind of impacts, what are the different resilient measures and what could be the indicators have been clearly jotted down. So it became important that how we are going to move forward. So what we thought was the best mechanism by which we could improve on climate change adaptation mitigation is to develop a plan at the local level, and for which we understood what are the awareness, preparedness, and mitigation level, and the level of knowledge, etc. What is the community involvement? What is the government and support? Based on which we develop what is known as CREVAMP. Actually, this model has been one of the reasons that why we could have a global platform while we are discussing about climate change adaptation mitigation. Now, when we did the project on GULLS, it means that global understanding and learning for local solution. We understand that climate change impacts are global, but the solution needs to be local. So we develop what is known as climate resilient village adaptation mitigation plan. So what does it indicate? It indicates that the development comes in India at a 3-tier level. We have a district, we have the block, and we have the village. So, and each and every village, we'll be developing a plan based on the vulnerability assessment studies done across. And this particular CREVAMP model is indicated like this, where we have different elements, approaches, and outcome. There are different players, namely government, society, and individuals. And with the elements and approaches, we will be trying to develop some of the outcomes, which could be a village climate information system, climate communities, green fishing, and adaptation mitigation plan. So we also wanted to identify that who could be the climate change agents supporting this. So we understood that there could be 4 major climate change agents. One, it could be the experienced fishers, because the IT knowledge of the fishermen is going to play a huge role in ensuring that the fish landings are not going to come down. Next, we found that committed women, because over the period of time, we understood that women weren't empowered. The income mainly went to the men. So because of that, we started finding some of the options through micro enterprise groups like the Kudumbasri, the Janasri, or the SAF, Society of Residents Fisherwomen, based on which we created small activity groups, which were initially activity groups, and now they have been represented business units with funding from the government as well as collaterals from the different agencies. Then we also thought that what would be the role of a proactive youth? The proactive youth plays a very major role now in having cage culture being done in a cage culture, as pen culture in open sea, or else in the backwaters. And also we wanted to impact climate change literacy to the kids in the schools. So we started finding different nature clubs and climate clubs in the different schools. Based on it, these are some of the paintings which the students felt. And we wanted to support them through the vernacular support. We started developing climate education series. And even after all these things, when I finished by taking that it's quite difficult to impart the concept of climate change to the science as a science to the fishers actually. Second, when the landings come down, the climate change scientists feel that climate change could be the reason. And you might remember that when sardine came down, there are different schools of thought which emerged that why sardine has come down. There could be many factors. And climate change becomes a felt need to the fishermen, but not to the government, because government finds that it is going to create, it is going to cost a lot of money to the exchequer. And finding alternate options with the resistance of the people, strengthening value chains are going to be the major challenges for the future. So with that, thank you all.